I would say that mentoring as a behavior is an investment in a relationship more than an outcome, less transactional. I don't, even though people say this all the time, I don't as much believe like I mentor you to hit or be a good soccer player, or I mentor you in algebra. To me, that's tutoring and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
It's helping someone build a skill.
Mm-hmm.
Mentoring says that I have some investment in getting to know you as a human, and the relationship is first and the skill transferal is second. It doesn't mean they don't often happen. It just means the gateway or the priority is the relationship.
Hello and welcome to the CoachCraft Podcast, where we explore the art of coaching youth sports through conversations with exceptional coaches. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the philosophies, experiences, the stories, and insights of coaches who are making a difference in their communities and beyond. I'm your host, Alf Gracombe, and I hope CoachCraft will inspire you to learn from these coaches and improve your craft as a coach and a leader in your youth sports communities. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the show. Today, we're joined by David Shapiro, President and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Boston, America's first YMCA and one of Massachusetts' largest private social services providers. Many of my guests, as you know, come from the world of soccer, but David brings a unique perspective as someone who has coached grassroots youth baseball, while also building an exceptional career in nonprofit leadership and mentorship. And in addition to baseball, David also played American football in college and wrestled at the high school level as well. Prior to leading the YMCA, he spent over 20 years as a servant leader in the mentoring movement, including 11 years as CEO of Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership, where he worked to close the mentoring gap for young people across America. His expertise in building movements and driving equity through relationships has been recognized by organizations like the Social Impact Exchange and the Stanford Social Innovation Review. And in 2022, he became the first recipient of the Boston Celtics Shamrock Foundation's Bill Russell Mentoring Award. David's journey bridges the worlds of youth sports, community development, and organizational leadership, offering insights on how the principles of coaching and mentorship create lasting positive impact. I hope you enjoy this excellent conversation on sport, mentorship, leadership, and community with David Shapiro. David Shapiro, welcome to the CoachCraft Podcast.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here, David. We've known each other for, I think, about 10 years or so now, and my introduction to you was as a coach. You coached my son in a baseball game. I think our kids were about 8 or 9 maybe at the time. So it's a pleasure to get to sit down with you here and have you on the podcast. So
thank you so much. Yeah, and I think actually the story of our children first meeting and our family's first meeting, which doesn't even start with you and me, was, I think, our wives coming into contact with each other and comparing notes that they both had 4-year-olds that maybe liked baseball more than anyone on earth. And so they just let them play together. And we're like, these kids are obsessed.
Yeah. Trevor came home talking about this kid named Jack that he just met playing baseball.
Same with Jack.
Schoolyard. So awesome. So here we are many years down the road. And I should also mention we are at the YMCA of Greater Boston, where David is the CEO of the organization. So I want to start, David, just a little bit of background about the organization. It's an old organization. It started back in the 19th century. This building, I think, was built early 20th century. And here you are as the CEO in the 21st century. So a lot of history to cover, but I'd love, you've got 30 seconds or less to do this. Just a little bit of background about the organization and how you came to be here.
You're sitting in America's first Y. The organization was started in London, but when it first came to America, it spent about 50 years with people meeting, I'm sure mostly white men meeting, about what the YMCA would be in America. And now here on Huntington Ave, you're sitting in the first building ever built in America dedicated to a YMCA. It obviously, has been a front porch to America for immigrants, but originally for white men to basically learn body, mind, spirit. So that's everything from job skills, language skills, working out, and housing, and Christianity were the early roots of the organization, and over time has morphed into everything from being the place that many people send their kids in the summer for swim lessons, to seniors doing balance classes, to people having a gym membership, to us doing hunger relief, job training, adult education, and many other skills. So we're now the largest social service agency in the Commonwealth.
Amazing.
And you're sitting in one of our 13 locations as well as our summer camp locations.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for the background. And yeah, just an amazing organization. And just a little bit, maybe you can talk about how you see yourself as a leader here in this organization. Now we're in the 21st century. We're in the midst of, obviously, a lot of societal changes underway. The city of Boston has changed a great deal in the last 100 years, much less last 20 years even. But how do you see your role as CEO of this organization in the Y at this point in time?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons I really wanted to join this organization and was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to have the job was there's something about power of place and power of access. I think these are also very relevant in sports and coaching at this moment in American life, that I think are a gateway that can diminish / are diminishing depending on which stats you're looking at, and that the Y with these incredibly credible locations. So you don't have to prove to community you're community grounded when you've been somewhere for 100 years or 50 years, or when your staff looks like people in the community. The Y is a collective of members. There's no economic barrier if you can't afford it. All ages come to the Y. It's open 72 hours a week on average. Like, it's just a multi-use, multi-purpose, very accessible front porch. And we have had a greater sorting in America. Even coming out of COVID, we had less kids going to public school. We have less people participating in church and civic organizations. We knew that from Bob Putnam's work, Bowling Alone, and other work on social capital. We had the former Surgeon General most recently declare a crisis, an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. Where are we bringing community together? Who does community trust? And who thinks that their main purpose, assuming they could stay economically viable, because that's never off of the table, is to create full access, diverse community and opportunity? Who is that? Whose guiding light is that? I think the Y is one of the places where that's very much alive, and that's what we're thinking about every day.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, thanks for that. And there's a lot we could talk about just the Y itself. But I want to go back to you and your origins and kind of this journey that you've been on as a person up to this point where you are in the work that you do today. And so I like to start this question. This is ultimately a podcast about coaching, and that is how I got to know you as a coach. But kind of early days, young David Shapiro, I know you're from the Baltimore area, but curious just about the sports landscape and just kind of your coming of age within a youth sports environment and what that looked like.
Yeah, I mean, there were two main prisms for my love of sport. One was I'm the youngest of four. My older brother is 8 years older than me. He was the oldest and I was the youngest, or he is the oldest and I'm the youngest. And so he was kind of with the 8-year age spread, like part dad, part older brother. I mean, I idolized him. I still idolize him. And he played sports. So
simple as that.
I wanted to do whatever he was doing. Additionally, by the time I was coming of age, and there was a sort of, a journey that got my father here, but by the time I was coming of age, my father was working in professional sports. Okay. He was a baseball agent at the very advent of agents. In fact, when I used to go into school and say, they would ask what my dad for a living, and I would ask him, he would say, tell them I'm a lawyer and I work on sports, because he thought agent had such a negative connotation. In fact, one of the three kind of original sports agents, one of them was very famous here in Boston, Bob Wolf, who had a lot of the Celtics. But there just weren't that many baseball agents. The other guy was Mark McCormick, who created IMG and was Arnold Palmer's agent. But my dad came of age sort of right as free agency hit baseball. Mm-hmm. Curt Flood went to the Supreme Court. He came of age in Baltimore right as the Orioles were one of the best teams in baseball.
What, early 80s?
Late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. His first client was Brooks Robinson,
wow,
which was somewhat accidental towards the end of his career.
Yeah.
And so I both was around professional athletes in a very spoiling way that I didn't realize at the time, and a team that was really good, watching a lot of professional sports and especially baseball.
Yeah.
And meeting players who felt like regular humans to me. But
you knew Eddie Murray, is that right?
Eddie Murray.
Unbelievable.
There was a ping pong tournament that, I mean, this is my one. This would be my biggest brag in the whole conversation. There was a ping pong tournament that I would organize when my dad would have all the players over. Now, again, for people who don't realize what this time was like, my father represented 60% of the team because players didn't move around yet.
Yeah.
And so you could represent 60% of a team. So I would organize baseball with the complete brackets and everything for these guys. And if you don't know, baseball players have elite hand-eye, so they're really good at ping pong. I mean, you won't meet many athletes that are. And Eddie and I'm sure because everyone else tanked, but Eddie and I would play in the finals almost every year and just have epic player. Well, I think they were being nice to an 8-year-old, but yeah, I loved Eddie. Eddie was also, I mean, like when you think about from like a trauma-informed standpoint and things like that, which I probably didn't realize at the time, Eddie didn't trust adults because he'd been burned by media and adults. He was phenomenal to kids. And so as a kid, I could never understand why adults would say all these negative things about Eddie. Yeah. What I later came to realize, and my father educated me around, was like he'd been burned by a lot of adults, but he loved children. He really did, and there's a lot of guys like that.
Wow.
So anyway,
I grew up in Northern Virginia, so this was back before cable television, and so the Orioles were not my team, but I remember that team, and Eddie Murray was the one player that I loved as a player. But I was a Red Sox fan, in part because we could get the Orioles on TV, but it was very grainy. So it just wasn't
clear pictures.
So the best, I just went, I'm going to the high resolution box scores in the Washington Post. For whatever reason, fell in love with Jim Rice, Fred Lynn, that era of the Red Sox. But Eddie Murray definitely as an Oriole holds a special place in my heart.
He's a cool customer.
And I just learned you played ping pong with him.
So I did. It was
never top that.
Yeah. So those were the two things really for me. Yeah. My older brother and my dad who introduced to love us.
So you were around baseball a lot. You also played football.
Yeah. Correct? And wrestled. Yeah.
You wrestled. Okay.
Yeah.
So what were those leagues like that you played in? Like, how did you learn to play these sports? Who were your coaches? Kind of what kind of community were you a part of?
Yeah. I mean, I played, Roland Park Little League, regular Little League. Football wasn't introduced until I was in 6th grade in my school. I never played Pop Warner. And wrestling, I started in 6th grade too, because my brother was wrestling in high school, or had wrestled in high school. And only in baseball do I ever remember doing like summer travel, although that was kind of like an oddity. It was nothing like the way it's so mainstream now.
Yeah.
And school sports were everything. And I went to an all boys school. And our sports and our facilities and everything, it was a very privileged place to go to school. It looked like it still does. It looks like a college campus now that I realize what public school sports often look like. We had all of our facilities right at school.
Yeah.
There were multiple fields and gyms. And I mean, there was a big emphasis put on.
Yeah. Both of our kids are athletes here at Boston City Schools.
Yeah.
This is decidedly not the situation.
Different experience. And in some ways, I would say an experience in which the athlete has to work harder to concentrate on their sport in a way that probably really benefits them. If you want extra training, it's not convenient. For me, everything was very convenient and I loved it. So I just was a rat. I was at school until 8:00 every night doing it.
What school were you at?
It was called Gilman School in Baltimore City. Yeah. And lacrosse is actually what it's most famous for, and I didn't play lacrosse, but
how is it you didn't play lacrosse, with that sport being as big as it is?
I didn't. I just hoped the girls would come over at halftime from the lacrosse games to the baseball games. That was our highlight.
So talk a little bit about the coaching you were getting, because for the most part, up until at least, the high school ages, you were playing grassroots, as we call it, sports. And so what were the coaches? Were mostly parents?
Up until 6th grade or so, when I started playing like middle school and eventually high school sports, my Little League coaches were dads. They were not my dad. I don't think there were any moms, thinking back on it, but they were dads. I remember, Mr. Hill. I remember Coach Winstead. I mean, they were awesome coaches. And they were just like dads that cared a lot about changing out of their work clothes and then coaching their kids baseball. It wasn't, I mean, we felt like it was hyper competitive, but the adults weren't crazy. Like it was everything was pretty in check. And, I just remember loving it. That's all.
Yeah.
We're loving it,
Yeah, no, very similar to my experience growing up. And, but we, the landscape's a little different now for our kids' generation. You have coached a fair amount now. You've got 2 boys. And what first drew you to coaching? Like, do you remember thinking, oh yeah, I want to coach when you're, a teenager or in college, or when did that happen exactly that you connected with coaching?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I left college, when I graduated college after being a college athlete, the thing I thought I wanted to do was go teach and coach.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen because, Teach for America was at its very beginnings, and my biggest option was probably to go teach and coach in private school, which ironically, even though I went to one and a private college, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do it in public school, and there just weren't that many inroads. And so then I went off on this nonprofit sector track. But so the answer to the question is I always wanted to coach because I always thought sports were like the most diverse, most dynamic places that I found myself in. And they really offered like very tactile and immediate feedback around some of life's great experiences and lessons. And that was just, that was powerful to me, but mostly the diversity. It was where I really saw like really a lot different kinds of people coming together and doing something with one goal in mind. It wasn't until, so I spent about 5 years post-college, and then my wife and I get married, and we moved to Boston, and we moved to the South End. And the neighborhood in the South End has great baseball for those that don't know Boston that well. And I didn't have a kid, and I didn't really know that model because where I come from, Baltimore, as I said, they were dads.
Mm-hmm.
But in the South End, they actually do have there's a fair number of like young guys just volunteering to coach. So that wasn't like a foreign thing.
Really? Okay.
And I went over there. Someone got me to someone, and I said, like, can I coach? And it's pretty competitive and good baseball for little kids, but it's still like neighborhood baseball. And I coached the 9-year-old Braves. I was assistant coach of the 9-year-old Braves. So I coached in Boston before I even had kids, and then I was just counting the days until I had kids and hoping they would like a sport I could.
Hoping they'd let you coach, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't think I realized that you'd coach before you had.
Yeah, before I had kids.
Like a lot of guys and folks like us, right? We start coaching when our kids start playing youth sports. So you're doing it before. And so when you started coaching, like you'd never really coached kids before. You played a lot of ball, so you knew the game, you knew what to do yourself. But this is really the first time you're like, I need to impart these skills to other little human beings.
Yeah.
How did you kind of educate yourself? How did you gain that experience and learn those coaching skills?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, to one degree, I think, and one of the guys that I really love, coaching with. So it wasn't until later on that I thought about coaches as partnerships. And obviously that's a luckiness if you have another person. But I think very on more from a negative aspect, I was co-coaching or assistant coaching a guy who was young, also no kid on the team, incredibly competitive. Like, this is the year the Braves are going to win it all. And like, they're 9-year-olds. Like and these games were intense. The whole neighborhood was around. It was a whole different culture. Like, this was not the neighborhood that we coach in. It was, people were fired up about their baseball.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've definitely seen it. Yeah.
They were fired up. So I a little bit had to decide, like, who am I going to be here? Am I going to double down on this, like, fired up competitiveness, or am I going to be like the quiet guy who just kind of like takes quiet moments with kids? And that's what I decided to be. Like, I was like, I don't need to amp these kids up anymore. I can be the guy who coaches the kids who aren't as good. I can be the guy who helps us remember this is supposed to be a little bit fun. And so without like dishonoring what he was trying to do in any way, I just decided to be a counterbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And that was more, I think, stuff I had learned from just kind of managing people and leadership and the role I play in other parts of my life.
So as a coach myself, I've done a lot of thinking about winning and losing in the context of youth sports. And especially someone like yourself, you've played sports at the college level, so super competitive environment. And now you're placed in this environment of kids.
Right.
And so you said to yourself, it's almost like you've made a conscious decision to be a certain way.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself in moments of being like, oh, we're so close to winning this game, right? I want to do the thing that's probably not the right thing to do, but we really want to win this game.
Yeah.
How do you balance that? How did you?
Yeah. I mean, I think I probably found myself more in that, once I was a dad coaching, it was probably easier not to get over competitive because you're not going home with the player who's disappointed when they're not your kid. So it's easier. Ironically, at a younger age and less mature, it was easier to be high-minded. I think the thought I would always have, the thing that always kind of brings me back, which is a silly, weird question. It's not very romantic, but like, what is the end game here?
Yes. Yeah.
Like when I was leaning on the boards watching my son, skate in ice hockey when he was 9, and all the dads began talking about how their kids were going to stay in shape to skate in the off season. And I began to get agita about like, my kid's just going to go play baseball. He's not going to do anything. Is that bad? Like the switch that clicks in my head is like, what's the end game here?
Yeah.
My kid skates all year. Like what am I doing right now? But I find myself asking myself a lot, like, what's the end game here? And that just kind of helps me because once you start thinking about like, what are we trying to keep up with the Joneses about to get where? That helps me.
So many forces now are forcing kids into one sport early.
Yes.
This idea of, hockey even being a year-round game as an example, but it's the same across every sport now.
Yeah. Because somebody can make money year-round. Like the end game here now, 90% of the time is somebody can make more money. I mean, now it's actually pretty clear what the end game is, but it's hard. Like I tell the story all the time because again, like I don't want to seem self-righteous or like I have some sort of perspective other people don't get. My kid gets his first like, congratulations, you've been invited to the Gatorade showcase in Florida.
Yeah.
Like, who am I to say like, Brennan, that's not because you're good, man. Go read down. They're going to charge me $5,000 for you to play in the Gatorade showcase. That's a hard thing to tell an 11-year-old who thinks he just won like the baseball. So it is hard. You can understand 100%. All these things are tryouts and invites to like Team E. Like, like it's just, they're not dumb. Like they built this model on charging you money, but making it hard.
And I totally agree with that. And I think it's even yes. And because there are also forces that the parents, every parent wants their kid to be successful.
Yes.
Right? How you define success, that's up to the family, up to the parent, up to the child. And kids, right? To your point, Brennan's like, yeah, I'm special. Like, this is awesome. Great. This is motivating me, right? There's an intrinsic motivation there to play at elite level, certainly for some kids who want that. So there's a lot of forces kind of taking us there, not in defense of, the capitalist, youth sports system, but yeah, there's just a lot of energy that can easily move you into these channels. And I mean, I've had, conversations because I think we all agree on the goal, right? We all love our kids. We all want the kids to do well. There's nothing better than seeing a child, yours or someone else's, be successful on the sporting field. But it's also easy to lose track of, what's the goal? That's right. That's the right question. The end game to me. That's great. And for some kids, a very, very small percentage of them, like that end game is playing at a professional level.
Right.
And it's hard to, you don't want to break anybody's heart at age 9, 10, or 11.
Right.
Hey, you're not going to play in the pros, kiddo.
Yeah.
But that is a reality. And I think as coaches, you've got to, that's a great observation. I keep in mind, what is the end game? Keep asking yourself that question. What's the end game?
Yeah. I mean, I find even like my son who's playing Division III college baseball, like summer baseball or internship. What's the end game?
Yeah.
Like if the end game is play as much baseball for as long as you can while your body will hold up, then play summer baseball. If the end game is like you really want to get on track to what you might do right after college, then go get an internship. But we make all these things like these zero-sum games where you're choosing a path for the rest of your life. It's like the old choose your own adventure books. So you could go back and course correct, and most of us cheated and went back and chose the other pace. But like, it's, I always tell my kids, like, privilege equals course correction. There's a lot of people in America that have a lot less room to course correct for reasons of money, race, geography, all kinds of things, generational wealth. But if you have a certain level of privilege, and it doesn't have to be extreme privilege, if you have a certain level of privilege, you can typically course correct. Everything you've ever been sold in your life is because someone said, offer running out, time's running out, best offer now. Like that's how the idea that you can't course correct is how you get sold things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what you have to try to avoid, but it's really hard when you love this child and they love this game and all that stuff.
Right. And as a coach, so, you have coached a lot in Boston, and I think safe to say, some pretty diverse group of kids and families, and it's reflected in your work here at the Y, as you said in your opening remarks. But what are some of the things you've observed as a coach and with these different types of kids coming from different backgrounds, maybe parents that have different expectations or goals for their kids than you might, or that another player might? Like how do you see kind of diversity playing out within the youth sports context and your role as a coach? You're serving the kids first and foremost. Those are your players. Those are the kids that you're coaching, but you're also kind of serving their families and the parents as well. So what kind of dynamics have you seen kind of develop around that, and how do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think parents have really different relationships with the game and really different relationships with their kids. And it's not really hard to figure out what those are. And then I'm not going to change an adult, but
what's an example of
so there are some parents who know nothing about the game. So they're watching their kid with wonderment playing a game. They like me watching hockey. I can't skate.
It's all
amazing the whole time. It's amazing. There is the parent who once played the game and thinks they know everything about it and thinks their kid is better than them or as good as they were, or they were once great. There's the parent who remembers struggling and not being good at the game, who's nervous their kid's going to be the same way. We're essentially like pretty narcissistic like creatures. So it usually has something to do with their relationship and experience with the game. Are they nervous because their kid feels bad about himself? Are they nervous because their kid always feels great about himself? Like it's usually some set of anxieties or expectations that they have based on the relationship to the activity and to their child. And deconstructing that pretty quickly is pretty easy. Once you know what that is, I don't try to change them. I'm not going to change their relationship to the game or to their kid. That's what it is. I can neutralize it or complement it. So if your dad is a yeller or your mom is a yeller,
usually the dads, but
you're not going to get a lot of volume from me. Like they're doing plenty up there. I mean, if it was disruptive or wrong, I would talk to the parents.
Right.
But if it's just like they're way too into it, like you're not going to get a lot of volume from me. Yeah. If your parents never come to your games because they might be working or they might, that's another like diverse element of diversity is the home life and work demands. There's some kids whose parents, I mean, I remember watching high school basketball for one of my sons, like some kids' parents never came to a single game.
Never met them.
Kids were stars.
Yeah.
But like that was just the way their life lined up. Like being able to chase games like I do and watch all your kids' game is a gigantic privilege of time and everything else. So for those kids, I would be like, hey, you want me to text your dad and tell him what a great game you had? Just because like their parents didn't know anything about what was going on.
Yeah.
I did a fair bit of texting with parents to say what happened. Like, he got his first hit today but again, not around the kids that were stars. Like I didn't feel the need to I just felt the need to be complimentary. Like if it was star, there's, I can remember a kid I had a long conversation with and I spent 4 years probably off and on in different times with him. All we ever talked about was being a great teammate. He was a great player. So he would say, like, did you see that catch I made? And I'd say, were you a good teammate today?
Yeah.
And he'd look at me like I was nuts. He was like 10 years old. He didn't even know what I was talking about. By the time he got to be 14, he was like, I think I understand how to be a good teammate. And I would say, like, you were a great teammate today. But like, for other kids, it's like, dude, you got to understand your swing is perfect. It's going to connect with the ball eventually. Yeah. But like, I'm watching just your swing and there's nothing you should be doing differently,
I mean, this, watching you coach in the limited time that I had watched, that was what struck me about your approach, was that you were really getting to know these kids on an individual basis. And I think a lesson or a message to anybody who's coaching kids is get to know those kids. And if you can, get to know their family situation. Yeah. Obviously within the boundaries of, respecting privacy and everything. But it's just amazing to see how kids are showing up at the field coming from just different situations.
So different, right? Like, and some are walking from forever away, some need a ride, some's all like parents and grandparents are at every game, and none of it's a judgment. You also don't want to make any kid feel strange about like, where are your parents? But these are the things you think, like you want to say like, where's your dad or who dropped you up? But like all kids are looking for at a certain age is like, what makes me different or weird or other than everybody else? So the last thing you want to do as an adult, it's like, oh, you don't have a clean jersey. Like, here's a jersey, man. Like, that's not the time to lecture a kid about like responsibility and having a clean jersey. Maybe if they're 16. Yeah. But like most kids at that age, like they're a product of whatever the rhythms of their home life might be. And so you just try to, fold into that, as best you can.
So there's the obvious way of determining winning and losing by looking at the score at the end of a game or your record at the end of a season or whatever it might be. But what does it mean to have a winning team to you? Hi, just a short break to thank you for tuning into the CoachCraft podcast and a reminder to head over to CoachCraft.info. That's CoachCraft, one word, .info, and hit the subscribe button for the CoachCraft newsletter, where you'll get some great content in your inbox for youth coaches of all levels. Mostly focused on soccer, but plenty of great insights, tips, and recommendations for coaches of all youth sports. That's CoachCraft.info. Thanks, and now back to the program.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I see kids that hurt for each other and are as excited for each other as they would be for themselves, or maybe more, in small moments, like a ball goes through the shortstop's legs and the third baseman's over there putting his arm around him, or a kid just hit a home run and the kids are going freaking crazy for him, and he's just kind of mellow about it. Like, those are, or like we had a young woman, she got her first hit of the season, like in the 15th game, and the place is going crazy. Like, that to me tells me you've got a successful team. They may not be successful at scoring, but they're successful. They've developed as a team because they sort of care for one another and how things go. So
it's interesting. You're sorry to cut you off, but your answer doesn't really touch on the sport itself.
No, I just think the sport's a vehicle, and I love baseball because there's tons of downtime. So all this, like this nice thing you said about me knowing all the kids, like only in baseball you get like a
lot of time.
I mean, we, Brad and I still talk about a guy I coach with, like we were in the middle of the like most dramatic moment in the Mayor's Cup, which in Boston's neighborhoods playing each other, I think 8 or 9U. And this one kid that we both love so much, he's sort of a great competitive kid, but also a free spirit. We're near the airport, and he points up to a plane and goes to Coach David, what kind of plane do you think that is? And I was like, dude, it's like 3-2, 2 outs, bottom of the 7th. But like,
isn't that the perfect mindset for a ball player?
That's perfect. Yes. And for this kid, it was perfect too. But yeah, like I think that, those are the moments you remember, and baseball gives you the space to do that. I think coaching in really intense, free-flowing sports like soccer, like football, like hoops, I'm sure it's harder to not let the emotion get the best of it. It's also hard to carve out time to get to know your kid.
That's true.
You do most of that in baseball just because you're there. It's slow.
Yeah, maybe that's why I'm not a baseball coach, is I don't like to talk as much. But no, you're absolutely right. And I think baseball is unique in that way. And I think, that's a lot, on the soccer side, what we talk about with kids is, there's always this impulse. The game's going on. It's just free-flowing action. And, like you're a coach, like, oh, I should be coaching on the side. But actually the kids you probably should be talking to are the ones that are on the side.
Yeah.
Who are out of the game at that moment. Like, that's where you can actually affect how they think about the game. Kids out there playing the game,
Right.
in the middle of it, forget it. They're going to hear you. Whatever you're saying is probably outdated information anyway. And if they even hear it,
It's one of my favorite things to see, even in the most elite level and a big time, especially I see it in Division I basketball very occasionally. But when a guy who's, walking back, and they have 7 assistant coaches, so I don't know why these guys aren't doing it. But when one of these big time coaches that that's prowling the sideline turns around back to the court and the action and is talking to the kids on the bench about whatever just happened, I'm like, that guy's a good coach.
Yeah.
As you said, he knows the 5 on the floor are going to do what the 5 on the floor are doing. They're
right. Your time to coach them is not
over. But these guys are like your investment in
the
future, in the moment. Nobody knows when that moment will come.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, a little bit of a pivot, if we can, from coaching. We could talk about this probably till tomorrow.
Yes. We've never ended a meeting or session on time. That might not be a great invitation to your listener, but
no, it's a great invitation. So let's talk about mentorship, because this is, frankly, I'd say kind of an adjacent space to coaching. And I don't have a lot of exposure myself to mentorship specifically, but you've worked professionally in this space, and I think you've oriented a lot of your life around it, and you certainly have a great base of knowledge around it, a lot of experience. So maybe just start, if you can, with what do we mean when we say mentorship? What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I mean, it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. I think there is an evidence-based and actual field of, mentoring, which is about structured mentoring. That's about, like, if I introduce you to a stranger and you're the mentee and I'm the mentor and we have roles to play and expectations and a covenant. That's a structured mentoring program. Many think of Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
Yep.
And that's mentoring. We also sometimes say that's mentoring as a noun. You're a mentor and I'm the mentee. There's mentoring as a verb, which is just behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that mentoring as a behavior is an investment in a relationship more than an outcome, less transactional. Even though people say this all the time, I don't as much believe like I mentor you to hit or be a good soccer player, or I mentor you in algebra. To me, that's tutoring and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
It's helping someone build a skill.
Mm-hmm.
Mentoring says that I have some investment in getting to know you as a human, and the relationship is first and the skill transferal is second. It doesn't mean they don't often happen. It just means the gateway or the priority is the relationship. I think it happens in reverse too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Skill. I'm a guy who might be in the STEM professions and you're a kid who loves robotics. And my job is to help mentor you around building a robot. And then, oh, by the way, along the way, we find out we know people in common and we become friends and I learn about your family. And next thing you know, I'm in a more... But at the end of the 6 weeks, I might have just taught you to build a really kick-ass robot and didn't get to know you. And I would have done fine in my job as a robotics.
Mm-hmm.
I would not... Mentoring would say that first I'm trying to get to know you,
mm-hmm.
and then I might transfer skills.
So you talked about with coaching, like what's the end game, right? What is the end game of mentoring?
Yeah, I mean,
or how do you think about it?
To give them, the mentee, a sense that they have somebody who's unconditionally in their corner.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because you're trying to break down levels of authority. So typically in mentoring relationships between adults and kids, and in the best mentoring relationships, they're not grounded in like, I am the coach and you are the player. I am the teacher and you are the student. I am the dad and you are the kid. They're grounded in like, we are two humans in relationship. Now, I may be older and be able to open doors for you or have experiences that I want to share with you, but we are sharing power. We're meeting. I want to know what you want to accomplish in life. I want to be alongside your journey. I will stay consistent for you. But I think like the end game is shared journey,
mm-hmm.
unconditionally in someone's corner and in their life. I mean, at its purest level, long-term mentoring relationships, that's what they are.
Yeah. No, that's really, interesting. And I feel like there's obviously a lot of, I said, adjacent spaces, I'd say really overlapping spaces. Mentorship is certainly a part of coaching, but it is getting to know that person and being with that person, and also like, yeah, it's a little bit of you talked about the power dynamics of it. Maybe can you talk a little bit more about that? It was and how you started to frame it.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about sort of shared power and invested interest. So like if I am trying to mentor you to do something, that's why I don't like that vocabulary,
right,
because that means the outcome is the one I want. If I am asking you, what are you interested in? Bowling, movies, becoming a great actor, riding on a postage truck. I don't know what you want to do. But if I am asking you what your interests are and then trying to figure out how to support you in getting to those interests, I am performing a mentoring role for you. I am not mentoring you to do something. That's an imposition. That to me is the antithesis of mentoring.
So mentoring should really begin with a question to the mentee. What is your goal?
Yeah.
And but a mentor can help shape those.
Of course they can, as long as they're not, like putting their own goals and biases and aspirations onto the young person. But yeah, they can say, tell me more. I mean, I still remember like the first kid I ever mentored, I said in a formal relationship, I said, we can do anything, man. What do you want to do? 8-year-old boy. And he said back to me, nobody's ever asked me that question, which was humbling in and of itself, because he lived in a life with such kind of like distress and so few adults and so many kids that nobody ever asked him, what do you want to do?
I also think he doesn't really have the tools to even know how to maybe answer that question fully.
Right.
He can say, yeah, I want to.
So then it was options. So then it was like, my kids like bowling. We could go up on a hilltop in the Blue Hills and look at the city. We could, like we go out on a rowboat. No, I don't want to do that. I'm not comfortable, but like it became giving options, but they were still options of what I thought kids like to do, not what I like to do or what I thought he should want to do. And so I just think there's something about centering the mentee in a mentor-mentee relationship that is maybe different than some of the skill development, coaching, tutoring type things. In a purely mentoring relationship, you sometimes have to like coach and mentor and tutor people to do something. I just think it's less relevant when you want to have a pure mentoring relationship.
How do you look at it? You mentioned your first experience as a mentor was with, you said an 8-year-old, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So 8 years old.
Yeah.
Versus 16 years old.
Yeah.
What is that? What do you see as different as a child is getting?
Yeah.
older?
I mean, what the research says, versus what I say, but I think it's probably right, is that with an 8-year-old, often the friendship model it works and it's worthy and it's sticky enough just to say like, hey, Alf, I'm going to keep showing up every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. and we're going to do cool stuff together. And you just can count on me showing up as part of your life. And I'm going to do that for the next 12 months. And eventually you have to have closure and help a kid understand if that relationship is ending, why it's ending. But with a 16-year-old, usually it has to be bound to resources and opportunities. Because with 16, I'm thinking like, I don't need to freaking hang out with this guy every Saturday. I don't need a friend. You do. We all need friends, always. But you don't think you need friends. You think you need a job.
Right.
And you think you need to make the basketball team. And you think you need to meet a girl. And you think you need to buy cool shoes. And like there's more like just resource transactions that are bearing down on you when you're older. And so normally you need to be, as a mentor, a gateway to some of those transactional opportunities. And that will make the relationship sticky too. But it is more about like mentoring you to do something. But again, it is mentoring to do something that the mentee wants to do. And those are usually more transactional.
Yeah.
Resource brokering is what we call it.
Okay. There's a term for it.
More resource brokering, opening doors, social capital, people call it.
Yeah.
It's like not what you know, it's who you know. That starts to matter a lot more at 16 than at 8 when you're just like, this guy keeps taking me to do fun things.
Right. And it sounds like, listening to you talk about it and just in my own limited experience, it also feels a little higher stakes when it's a 16, 17-year-old, right? That next stage of life is consequential.
Yeah. I think for them, they're feeling like closer to consequence. I think, the mentor at all of these stages has to figure out not to think of him or herself as a savior. So like, yeah, it's consequential, but like you aren't going to open a door that's going to forever change a child's life. Or everyone always asks me like, how do I talk to them about this? How do I have this conversation the conversation is going to happen when it should. It's going to happen based on trust and longevity, like any relationship. It's going to happen when you least expect it, on the 9th hole of a mini golf course. Like, it's not going to happen because like something tragic happened and he wants to pour his heart out to you. Like, it doesn't happen on your terms. That's the whole point of mentoring. It happens on the kids' terms or the mentee's terms, but it will happen when it will happen, and it's usually a slow burn. And if you're willing to treat it like you do other relationships that matter in your life, which means it's not one and done.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's always interesting to me. It's interesting to me about being in the nonprofit sector where you try to raise money. People are like, is that the thing that works? And I always say to people of privilege, like, that's how you raised your kids?
Mm-hmm.
You were like, did the violin take? And then when they were like, no, you were like, oh, I'm done with you. That's a bad intervention. No, you started throwing every other thing. So like, if you're willing to throw lots of things at a kid, lots of opportunities, lots of consequential opportunities, and just be there, all the research on boys especially shows that like the biggest differentiator in outcomes for boys is whether they have a man in their life who will show up no matter what. Like, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, across all ages.
Pretty much. And economics. And I mean, like, certainly there are odds and there are lots of structural disadvantages that people are up against. But like, one of the biggest differentiators for boys in their healthy development, all of the research shows, is like just a man who will show up no matter what.
Yeah. So not switching gears, but kind of moving into a little bit of a different area for our discussion. All right, we've talked about coaching, talked about mentorship. The thing that I've always admired about you, or one of the things, I admire a lot of things about you.
One is plenty.
Is you are a person who very much orients around other people. Community is the word for it. And how do you think about this? How do you think about coaching in the context of community? We talked a little bit about it, families and expectations and kids and diversity and people coming from different places, and what makes a community even? I mean, communities are not, the edges around communities are not always, firmly defined. But just to bring it back a little bit to sports and youth sports specifically, but maybe not exclusively, but let's just say youth sports. Community, right? Like, how do we talk about Jamaica Plain Youth Soccer, where I've done a lot of work, as we're a community, right? Why is community so important to youth sports?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way you feel a part of a community is if someone invites you, there's access to it, and you feel a sense of belonging. And I would argue that just like sports, just like great school communities, great faith communities, see, none of these things are things unto themselves. Mm-hmm. Like, just because there's a church doesn't mean there's community. Mm-hmm. Just because there's a sports team doesn't mean there's community. And just because there's a school doesn't mean there's community. But places that want to build community around the activity, sports is one of those things that is a great accelerator of community. It's going to draw people together. It's going to become a rite of passage. Like, my wife is a second grade teacher in a neighboring neighborhood who's telling kids that love baseball about the Little League that my kids played in, like many years later. She says, I'm definitely going to coach when my kids are gone. But like, it's a way to stay invested in community, to welcome new people into community, to create mini communities within community. Like, it's just, it's a huge accelerant, I think.
And do you see, as these communities emerge, or they're being built, or they happen, but they don't happen by accident.
Right.
Behind that is intention.
Yes.
Of the people that are showing up to make this activity happen, right? So what's the sign of a healthy, let's stay specifically within sports, but we can also talk about the why here. But like, what are the ingredients of healthy community where people feel they belong, people feel like themselves or their kids or whoever, the community is oriented around, that they are becoming better people, becoming better baseball players, whatever kind of the goals of that community. Like, what are the ingredients of healthy community?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ability of the experience of people in that community who bring very different contributions and have very different experiences in the community to have a positive one. So like, I'll hear people say, man, my kid loved playing in that league. And I'm like, did they keep playing baseball? No, never again. They hated baseball. Like, did they keep playing baseball? Oh yeah, my kid's playing college ball now. And his beginning of his love of baseball was in that little league. Like, if you get enough people say, oh, did they have language translation in that league? Oh yeah, they did. Did they market in the neighborhood of a neighborhood over where everybody maybe looks different, but there isn't a little league? They did. Like, it's just all about like, how hard is that league working to be inclusive? How hard is that league working to send the signals that like, this has nothing to do with your child's ability. Like, it's our desire to make sure they have a great experience no matter what. There are other elite teams, and especially in the pay-to-play world now, where they're promising you for your money, your kid will get elite instruction. He or she may not, but they're promising you elite instruction, a gateway to college. To me, that's not community. I mean, I'm not to say the kids don't say they have formative experience on those elite teams. Sure. Both my kids in AAU baseball had really formative experiences. But if you're trying to create community, then it can't have barriers, in my mind. It's got to be inclusive. Yeah. And ability is something that does end up separating us in sports. So to me, truly, and this is why I love coaching little kids, like they get to the age where I don't want to coach anymore, because ability is it can be a limiting factor. Now, if I was coaching elite kids, my job would be to make it's a different job. Who feels the least of the elite kids, like the most of the elite kids. But I think that's how you create inclusive community, is everything.
So grassroots sports, obviously it's different than these elite, every sport has them for kids now. But let's talk about grassroots sports for a moment, because it's not everything that you've said, which I 100% agree with. It's very little talking about the sport itself, right? And maybe that shouldn't be the most profound observation, but but these kids are there to learn something, right?
Yes.
Kids take music lessons, kids take art lessons. Sports, in a sense, is a lesson of learning the sport. But you said it earlier, I think it's really kind of the vehicle for community. Again, grassroots, we're talking community programs. But you're also an athlete, and you're also a very good coach of teaching kids, the skills of the game. So how does that fit in for you? It's just a nice byproduct, or how intentional did you find yourself as a coach around, the importance of fielding a ground ball correctly, getting your footwork right, kind of down to these specific details. How do you think about those things?
I mean, I think when you're developing a community, you're trying to talk about the intentionality of the different goals that people have that are there. And so I think the conversation I've definitely had with lots of my teams are, when it comes to like trying to be better and play better, is there's a lot of kids on this team who care deeply about us winning, about us playing well, about us working hard. And if you're here, like, I'm asking that you devote yourself to a similar thing. I don't say that to 8-year-olds, but I would say that to 13-year-olds. And no one's saying you have to be here. Like, I'm happy to talk to your parent about the fact that you don't like this anymore or whatever. Like, if you need a way to get out of this. But like, if we are here, we are dedicating ourselves to fully being here. It doesn't mean we can't have fun. It doesn't mean we won't fail. It also means that the guys who care a lot about winning, and you know this from watching these things, it also means that the kids who care a lot about winning, when another kid makes a mistake or they make a mistake, we're not going to beat ourselves up and beat up other kids about it. Like, we know we're all trying hard.
Right.
And so, but I think you just have to, like, I mean, those are life. I mean, like, we all want to succeed. And if you're like on your phone in right field, like, we have to have a conversation, not because I want to win this game, but because, like, the kid at first base cares deeply about this game. Yeah. And that's disrespectful. Like, I can take you out. I got other kids that can play right field. Like, let's just have a conversation if you want to be here.
Well, and you're orienting that conversation around actually community or obligation or responsibility you have to a teammate.
Right. And the least of those is me.
Yeah.
Because everyone will already place the adult or the authority figure in that role. And like, I would say to my kids all the time, it may sound irreverent, but like, I don't necessarily want to be here. Like, I've worked a long day. Like, this is hard. I'm here because you guys need like an adult to coach this game. This isn't going to make my life if we win or lose. It's just up to you guys. I mean, I've said it to my own children on the way home and they're crying about it. Like, I would much rather be your father than your coach. This can be my last game coaching if you want it to be. Like, you have to remind them also to give them some perspective because they will see moments, as you said earlier. I mean, I'm a competitive guy. There are moments when I look like I really want to win this game because I do.
We've all been there.
Yeah, but I need to remind them like this, I'm done my career.
Yeah. Well, this is something at a certain point, coaching my son, I started saying at the beginning of each season to the kids, hey guys, this is your team. Yeah. This isn't the coach's team. We're here. We're committed to you guys. We're dedicated, to being here. But at the end of the day, you all need to own this team and kind of understand what you're trying to do as a group. Win, lose, do it together. But that was also my way of saying if we lose, it's not the coach's fault. That's on you. But in all seriousness, I think that's a really important, a great lesson for sports. Yeah, in particular, is like ownership.
I love that. And I mean, I saw that you often ask like coaches, like, what is your favorite ritual? One of my favorite rituals is, and I can't remember whether it's before or after the games, but after I say what I have to say, I always leave them to each other. Mm-hmm. I've never known what happens in those conversations. Yeah. But the point is like, I am temporal. Like I am here, but I am not at battle with you all.
Right.
Like talk to each other about what needs to happen today or what just happened.
Yeah.
And that's up to you guys. It could be that you just want to complain about me. Like, but whatever is going to bond you. Like, again, kids are always looking to adults. So it's like, this exists without me. Like, this is your space,
This is great. And
I know we probably need to wrap up.
Well, let's go. I've got a couple more things that I wanted to. So a little bit about leadership, because a little bit of maybe a shift away from the youth sports arena, but you've been operating over the last, let's just say 20 years or so, between, your own career and development as a leader in the nonprofit space and mentoring and here at the Y. And then you've done a lot of coaching at this point. So what are some principles, I guess, from coaching that translate directly into your work at leading an organization and maybe the other direction as well? How do you think about leadership?
I think learning, lifelong learning from everyone, everywhere, all the time. Again, I mean, if it isn't clear, I like to sort of like think about what cuts towards the grain and then try to go against it, only because I know that's my natural proclivity as a human. So
there's something to be learned.
Yeah, the archetype of leadership is that like you're supposed to think about the dictation, the speech, the commanding of where you're going to go, the vision. Nonprofits are big on describe your vision.
Yeah.
Your strategy, where are you going? Like my thing is like, I can do that if I need to do that. But like my vision is just a collection of everybody else's vision and all the listening I've done and all the things I've learned. And so there may be a moment when my job is to sum it up and give voice to it, but it's a collection of just trying to learn from everybody. And I feel that way about coaching. Like if you're actually listening to the kids, if they're little kids, it may be in whining. It may not be in like some great eloquent articulation, but if your ear is to the ground for listening, you're going to learn what people need,
So I agree with that.
Yeah.
100%. But I've also, in my own leadership journey, there's sometimes when a moment or maybe just a collection of some of the folks you have that are part of your organization, maybe they want to hear a more clear statement on vision or a more clear next step or direction. So I've always looked at this as there's a bit of a balance to be struck, and maybe some of that is just understanding who works with you and for you, and what's the culture of your organization and what's the expectation. But do you find yourself kind of balancing that sometimes? I mean, you have a lot of responsibility, right? Like you've got complicated issues before you and the broader organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I think one, just from a self-awareness standpoint, that's always harder for me, is to try to dictate the action or time. And there's times when I've had staff members, especially when I've had long working relationships with people, just say like, come on, man, just tell us what to do here, and I can, if I have to do.
To be clear, that's not my comfort space either. We're probably similar.
I needed to signal to people that you'll need to tell me if you need me to do something. But at the same time, I also am a problem solver, so I also have to tell people, if you're coming to my office with a problem and you don't want me to try to start helping solve it, you need to tell me you don't want me to solve this. You just want me to listen. So, I mean, knowing what your cues are, I think, because I know that if I sense nervousness or a need for direction, I will give it, because that's just kind of like my natural state. I'm trying to guard against that by knowing that like listening is probably a better strategy. But like most people are going to look to you when you have positional authority and say like, tell us what you think. Tell us, thank you for your time. You're so busy. I always say to our team, like, I am no more busy than you. We have the same amount of hours. Like nothing is different. You have demands. I have demands. Like people are already going to kind of put you on a pedestal and to criticize you too. But I'm always trying to self-correct for what's going to happen anyway. Yeah. So I just think like listening's harder. Yeah. Learning is harder. Learning from anyone is harder. I'm going to learn from donors because I need their money, so I got to listen. So I'm going to learn from the board because they're my bosses. Yeah. But am I learning from like 12-year-olds that are sitting in the lobby looking bored? Like I should ask them, what's up? Do
you seek out other leaders in different organizations, similar roles?
I do. I'm always talking. I mean, I think I probably take too many meetings that have no agenda, but I take a lot of meetings that have no agenda, because normally I started my day with one this morning. I think that the meetings you have that are non-transactional are with other leaders, with even staff, are usually the best. They're just really hard because once you get done all the transactional stuff, there's not a lot of energy left. Right. But I do really, really try. My brother, just to come full circle from the beginning of the conversation, my brother is the president of a professional sports team. He's still one of my heroes. And he's also wired incredibly the opposite of me. So I try to get a lot of like hearing how he's leading, and like he'll tell me like, dude, toughen up, or like you need to dictate some action here, or like, that's got to be clearer, Yeah. So
well, it's great to have that resource and to have it be in family as well. Yeah.
Yeah. He's huge for me. And the other thing I would say is that like, people can tell, they really can tell, whether you truly want to be surrounded by people who agree with you. I don't know what that signal is, or whether you really do welcome like a different perspective. And, I try to give off as many signals as I can that like, I'm really looking for a different perspective. Because I hear my own voice, like I agree with myself, but like, please bring something to this where is the blind spot? What am I not seeing?
And will you ask that question directly to people, or is this?
I absolutely will. I'll say like, especially the more certain I am, the more nervous I am.
Interesting.
Because I'll say like, it's really clear to me that we should do X. Like, what am I missing?
Yeah. I must be, nothing's this straightforward.
Yeah.
Right. I must be missing something.
Like the monopoly on the truth thing, which the whole world thinks it has right now, is like, I'm trying to teach my kids that that tweet was created because it does make sense in that few characters. But like, let's just deconstruct it for a second, because people have become masters of the like false equivalency. Well, if they could do that for the Ukraine, then they can't do that for modern America. It's like, they're not the same thing. And that's not what we're doing for Ukraine. But like, people have mastered the simplistic, you lock people up for COVID. Why can't you lock? It's like, they're not even like the same thing,
Yeah. Well, okay. So now we're on to social media, and how much?
Get out of here. No, we're done.
But no, 100%. Yeah. No, this is great. So I do want to ask you one more question before we get to my lightning round.
Yes,
which I've been looking forward to. But very specific question: how can youth sports coaches, better collaborate with other community organizations? I think here at the Y, sports is certainly a part of it, activity, but, there's a lot of grassroots sports programs in the city of Boston. And do you see opportunities for coaches in these grassroots organizations to intersect or collaborate with the Y?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are tons of opportunities, to collaborate with the Y because one, like if your team wants to work out or they need an indoor space or there's something you want to do to keep your team kind of together, we have great facilities for which to do that, and in this geography, they're mostly going to be, convenient for a good number of kids.
Yeah, you are in a great location.
Yeah, just had a track coach from a, Boston Public School say, no money, volunteer coach. I want to keep my kids together to work out. There's 8 of them. Can we come twice a week? And our people can figure those things out. So I think if you're wanting to keep your kids together and do different things, there's opportunities at the Y. I also think there's a lot of opportunities for them to work out if they don't have facilities at their school and things like that. So, and then I also think these are just meeting places. So if all the track coaches in the city want to get together, the Y is great. We've got space. So
space for collaboration.
Great for meeting and collaboration. Yeah. So those would be, I just think the real estate, I call them palaces for the people.
Yes.
The palaces for the people are available for everyone. And there's an open invitation and might not be easy for us to always figure out the logistics, but we want to be asked and challenged to figure out the logistics of how to provide that.
And you've talked a lot about access as well. And I think that's one thing, and I don't want to presume, but I would think that you all at the Y are pretty tuned into where there is a lack of or a shortage of access. And I know, as an example, again, Jamaica Plain Youth Soccer, we do serve, of course, we're located in Jamaica Plain, but we're also serving kids from Roslindale, Hyde Park, Dorchester, Roxbury, et cetera. But we don't have great, data, or we don't really know where the need are. We know it's there in kind of an abstract sense, but we don't always know how to make our programs available or think about, broadening access outside of, kind of our more direct demographic.
And we can usually get the word out. I think that's why the city turned us to be vaccine centers because it's a place you already trust. So maybe you would go. So if Roxbury parents hear about JP soccer, what they usually hear from the Y is about stuff that's good and low cost or free for their kids.
Yeah.
So this is just another thing. So I think it is a way. The one thing I would say, which is true of everything, right? It's the key to inclusive dynamic community is because a certain set of people are not showing up at your program, that's probably because they're not being invited in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
People will usually see that as some people don't care. They're our program's plenty full. Who cares about that neighborhood?
Yeah. Well, doesn't matter. We're up against resource constraints.
Yeah. We don't need more kids. We're fine. But other people will say no one comes from that neighborhood or no one likes soccer in that neighborhood or those people are never going to come over here. And it's I bet 9 times out of 10, there's some barrier that if you ask one question, they would come over with soccer. Yeah. So if you're saying that about your program and why people aren't coming from a certain place, I would challenge yourself to think about how to provide invitations.
That's a good observation. Yeah. So there's a good challenge for some of our community programs and sports programs in terms of expanding access. So, all right. Well, David, incredible. I really appreciate having this time with you, but you're not done yet.
Okay.
You are not done yet. I have lightning round. This is a relatively new thing here on the podcast, and I did prepare you a little bit for it.
Yes, I'm ready.
I'm not going to have a lot of follow-up, but I want to get quick, concise answers to this, and we'll go from there. Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Here we go. Who was one of your best coaches and why?
Coach Schloeder, and because he was tough but fair.
Tough but fair. How old were you?
High school football, defensive coordinator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Love it.
Old guy from Jersey.
All right, so your favorite team tradition that you've created or been a part of? This could be as a coach or as a player.
I think that one we talked about earlier, which is just leaving the players to themselves without the coach for some period. That's theirs.
Yeah, great. I love that. On to leadership a little bit. Something you do, a habit, a ritual that keeps you grounded as a leader.
Yeah, I think once I crossed the threshold of my home, it's time to be home.
Wow.
It took me a very long time to learn, and it's something I'm still working on every minute I'm home, but I sort of take a deep breath, put my phone on a shelf when I walk in, and try to reset. And then I feel lucky to reset.
Yeah. So difficult to do, though, right? I mean,
very hard.
These boundaries are so blurred in technology. I mean, you say leaving your phone to the side. Yeah, good for you. That's great. That's great. All right, last question for you. And we probably touched on it here and there throughout the conversation, but most valuable life lesson that sports has taught you?
I think that, rather than there being a prescription for success, that there will be moments that call on you, and everything you've done up to that point will either prepare you or maybe not fail you in that moment, but you don't really know when those moments are going to come, and you don't know exactly how to prepare for them, but just going about your process diligently will make you ready for your moment when it comes. And that's what you're trying to do, is just immerse yourself in the process.
I love that. Yeah, I've always thought, sports, what's so amazing about it is that it's unscripted, right?
Yeah.
And these moments just happen as part of the game or the season or whatever. And it is a performance. Playing a sport is a performance. It's like a performance without a script, though. You're not up there doing a dance routine that you've practiced. I mean, you've practiced a lot, but these specific things that happen in a game, you just can't be prepared for everything. And so I love that observation, because you do the preparation in order to be ready to handle kind of whatever is thrown at you.
Yeah.
Literally sometimes.
So we have, I'm sure in your family or anybody listening, you have these stories, right? With old friends, the rituals. You tell the same stories about the same games and one of the stories that gets told in my house all the time is about a 11-year-old Little League game where a pop-up felt like it was in the air for 100 years for a kid that probably hadn't caught a pop-up all year, who happened to catch it, and we won the, whatever. But it's not about either of my children doing anything or anyone who was even the best player, or anyone we even still know. Yeah. It was mostly that, when this kid found this opportunity in his moment, for whatever reason, he was ready for that moment. And it was incredibly cool. And we were all so happy for it. And I'm not even sure if he was more surprised or happy, but he was happy.
Both.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think it finds you in moments, and it's really fun to be those unexpected moments.
It's such a great observation. I love that. All right, Dave. Last question for you is, what's a resource, either something that serves as a touchstone for you or something that you've been using lately that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I'd say two things. One of them is Care of My Older Brother, which is he is very into Stoicism now, and Marcus Aurelius, and this whole, there's a whole movement around Stoicism. Yeah. And I've begun to just kind of read up on different parts of it. And there's a guy like Ryan Holiday who has a podcast who does a lot on Stoicism, and it's just, I like the philosophy behind it. I'm not a big subscriber to any one set of ideals.
So what do you understand Stoicism?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it does seem to be about a lack of egoism and a long view, and sort of you'll have your moment in the sun, but quickly it's somebody else's moment. Mm-hmm. And sort of just around this kind of servant leadership, kind of control what you can control for the moments that you can control them, and then pass on something better than you found it. Mm-hmm. I used to buy big, thing at the end of every baseball game, because if you've ever looked at a Little League kind of dugout after a baseball game, it looks like hell, is leave it better than when we came here, and I feel like Stoicism is a lot about just leaving it better than when you got here,
Beautiful.
So, and then I would say there is an organization called the Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport. I think it's chjs.org, that I'm lucky enough to be on the board of. It's founded by a friend of mine, Megan Bartlett, but she's been a real leader in the country around trauma-informed coaching, mm-hmm. But also more broadly coaching, because we all have trauma of some kind. And they do a ton of coach training, and just there's a lot of free resources. She's done a lot of work with people who have been very involved in kind of trauma-informed development for kids and brain science.
Yeah.
And there's a lot about brain development that Megan knows. You'd think she was a neuroscientist when you talk to her, that just what you were these kids are a pain in the ass is really a lot just the way their brains work and the way the brain develops. And once you learn about the science of it, you're oh, And you're a lot more tolerant of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I think having that scientific grounding behind, what's going on in these kids' brains when they grow up, on the sporting field, really, really valuable. Yeah. I've looked into, know a little bit about the organization. You and I have talked about them a little bit, and I will definitely put this in the show notes so that folks can link to it, because I think you got the URL right.
I sometimes mess up the letters, but hopefully I got them. Yeah. But yeah, this has been such a joy. I really appreciate you giving me all this time.
Yeah, David, it's been great. And thank you for your time. And this has really been informative, and I learned a lot really about the mentoring piece. I really appreciate that. We've talked a lot about coaching. That's kind of my comfort zone, but getting to learn a little bit more about mentoring and how that works in the context of coaching and just interaction and kind of working with kids and other humans. Just really appreciate what you shared today. So thanks so much, Dave.
Thank you. It was a joy. It
did. I have no idea how long
it was. For people listening.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Take care.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Wow. Just a very thought-provoking conversation there with David Shapiro. His journey from youth sports to nonprofit leadership offers great insights for all of us who work with young people. I was particularly struck by David's emphasis on relationships over outcomes, whether in coaching or mentoring. And his powerful question, what's the end game here? That simple question helps ground us when competitive pressures mount. His perspective on creating inclusive community through sports remind us that access and belonging matter more than winning. I love how David approaches coaching as a vehicle for something bigger, building character, fostering connection, and helping kids discover who they are. As he beautifully stated, we prepare young people for those unscripted moments that will inevitably come, both on and off the field. So thank you, David, for that great interview. And if you're enjoying these conversations with great coaches, I hope you'll share this with others in your coaching network. Thanks so much for listening to the CoachCraft Podcast. See you next time.